All right, starting off with the number one team in the country, and I think the clear best team in the country is Texas, Oklahoma. Well, Texas is the number one. We're talking about the game. Ewers comes back, doesn't play great, and he has the early interception. He played five after that. Again, Texas is the number one team in the country. That's really all I have to say on this game. Oklahoma, I mean, not bad. I don't think they're like a really bad team, but with their schedule and everything, it could be a semi-rough year for them. But for Texas, I meant after Ohio State's loss, I feel like throughout the season, the only two teams that had looked elite before Saturday were Texas and Ohio State. With Ohio State's loss, Texas just really feels like the only elite team to me in college football. They have Georgia next week. The Georgia game's next week, so that's really the test. I will talk about Ole Miss LSU. LSU ends up winning this game on a 40-yard touchdown in overtime. 40 yards probably too long. Anyway, LSU is, I don't want to say they're back because were they ever gone? I mean, their only losses to USC, and USC is definitely a good team despite their 3-3 record, and we'll talk about them in a bit. But LSU was definitely a playoff contender. They're right in the race. They'll probably move up to like 10th in the AP poll. I'd assume that if the season ended today, that they would be in, based on the college committee or playoff committee, that LSU would be a college football playoff team. Now, who else do they have in their schedule? I think they still have Alabama on their schedule, but that game is played at home. So their schedule is not the toughest going through. They could definitely finish the year 10-2, and I think a 10-2 LSU team would get them in, and they would also only be a one-loss team in conference play. So SEC championship is still definitely in the picture for LSU. And Ole Miss, I don't want to say the Kentucky loss is bad. Kentucky is 3-3 right now. They just lost to Vandy, so it looks a lot worse than I guess it was first thought when it happened. And then I don't want to say they're eliminated from the playoffs because they can win out, but I don't think they're going to win out. They still have to play Georgia. And it was kind of the two games were at LSU and Georgia. Those were the two big games for Ole Miss. They could have afforded to lose, and they could have still snuck into the playoffs. Now it's the Kentucky loss, and then they do end up losing this game. I think Ole Miss's playoff chances are, I don't want to say they're fully eliminated, but they're fading away really quickly. Penn State USC ends up being a great game. USC jumps out to a 20-6 lead. They had been a second half team all year versus Michigan, versus who else? Versus Michigan versus Wisconsin. There we go. They had outplayed both those teams in the second half, and then complete opposite story. Drew Aller turns over the ball 3 times. You win the turnover battle. You get out to a 17 receptions for the tight end, whatever. You end up winning the turnover battle. You end up going out to a 20-6 lead, and then you end up blowing that lead. I know it's only a 2-touchdown lead, but you still had the lead late in the fourth quarter to a 30-23 lead, and then you missed a field goal in overtime. Questionable call on that pass interference, but don't choke the lead. Don't choke a 2-score lead. Don't choke a touchdown lead. I guess maybe not a choke, but win the game in regulation is kind of what I'm saying. You can't blame the refs here. And I don't really see a lot of people do, but still, you end up missing the field goal. Penn State wins the game-winning field goal. I think a lot of people are kind of making fun. Hey, Penn State, you only won by 3 versus an unranked. USC is a lot better than an unranked team. They're a lot better than a 3-3 team. Their combined losses are by 13 points in total. So, yeah. And then it's a good win for Penn State. Penn State will now jump into the top 3 into the AP poll. Undoubtedly will be the number 3 team in the country going into this. And that Ohio State game, if they win that Ohio State game, Penn State may end the year 12-0, and I think Penn State ends the year 11-1 is what I would predict them right now. I don't know. They could beat Ohio State. This team can beat Ohio State. Not the way they played today, but they could. And that Ohio State game is so big for them that I think we just kind of been on the notion that it's going to probably be Oregon, Ohio State, and there's some people in the back of the room saying Penn State can make it. Now Penn State's definitely, they're definitely a team that can make the Big Ten. That's not a. What am I trying to say here? They're at the forefront. Yeah, we'll say that. They're at the forefront of the Big Ten championship race. Now, hyped up this game a lot, and oh boy, did it live up to the hype. So we'll talk about Oregon first. We'll talk about the winners first. So we talked about the hype of this game, and oh boy, did this game live up to the hype. So we'll talk about Oregon. The struggles earlier in the year with run defense, with running the ball, gone. Completely gone. They ran the ball well in this game, and boy, did they stop the run. By the way, side note, Ohio State ran for like 110 this game in total. I don't have the exact number, but around there, with the two best running backs in college football arguably on their team, or two of the top three, because Oregon played the number one back in college football, and he rushed for 200 yards and 3 TDs against them. So for the Ashton Jeanty Heisman campaign, game definitely supports that a whole lot more. Anyway, that was the problem with Oregon. They're a really good team. They could throw the ball well, good secondary, couldn't stop the run, and they could not run the ball, mainly because of the O-line. And that was really a problem in the first 2 weeks, and it kind of lingered, but it got better, and it got better, and it got better. And then by game number 6, by week 7, it's fine. It's good. It's to the Oregon level we thought it would be preseason. It's definitely built for the Big Ten, which is what Oregon had been recruiting, transferring, and developing for, is to have the trenches ready for the Big Ten. And not just ready to compete with the mid-level of the Big Ten, but to compete with the best of the Big Ten. And it culminated in this, in beating Ohio State. So, Oregon, I don't want to call Oregon an elite team, but this is a pretty elite game. And in Ohio State, this doesn't make me think Ohio State anything less. They had to go cross-country to Oregon in the best environment Autzen Stadium probably has ever seen, versus a top 3 team in the country, and it went punch for punch. That's normally something I would probably say for a team trying to upset a team, but so I won't use that. But they played the entire game, and at most points, a lot of points, I don't want to say a lot of points, they were the best team. The good amount of points, they were the better team, and they're still the national championship contender, Ohio State. I don't think anything less of them from this. The only thing is that Big Ten championship. Now that Oregon is definitely in the driver's seat to potentially go 12-0, and then Penn State you have to go to Penn State, the only other team that will compete for this spot, unless Indiana, no. Penn State, the only other team that will compete for this spot you have to travel to, and it's Ohio State at Penn State. That environment's always insane. So, Ohio State as a team, I don't look anything different besides maybe the running game, because that was really bad, besides that 153-yard run by TreVeyon Henderson in the second quarter. It was really bad. That's the only thing I would look at different. Ohio State is still a national championship contender. It's just now the Big Ten championship, and if they can make it. Because they can win out. And, well, if they win out, they'll make it. But if they don't win that Penn State game, they're not going to make it. So now it puts on pressure on every single game, especially that Penn State game. Final game we're going to talk about, but we're going to use it to talk about Big 12 contenders, mainly. We'll talk about Colorado, I guess, kind of. The running game is so atrocious. They rushed for, ready? Negative 29 yards, including sack yardage. But that factors in college football, so negative 29 yards. Running backs got 21 yards for them. Rushing game for Colorado is a problem. Again, I don't think we really, on this, I really want to talk about contenders more as we move through the season. but I kind of wanted to mention this about Colorado because if they won this game, they would have been well into the race to win the Big 12, and they're not out of it, but I don't think they will because I think we got a nice little three-headed monster in the Big 12, and that's Kansas State, BYU, and Iowa State. Now, Iowa State and BYU are 6-0 right now. We're not talking about their games, but a BYU Iowa State Big 12 championship to make the college football playoffs. Doesn't sound right, but that's where we are. But for Kansas State, I think a lot of people assumed, oh, Kansas State's not legit, whatever. BYU destroyed them. And, we talked about that game when it happened. They're still the same. They're still a Big 12 championship contender. They can still make it. Again, the only thing is, like Ohio State, that hinders them is that they have a conference loss to one of these teams that could make it above them. And who has the tiebreaker in BYU? That Kansas State's only loss is to BYU, a 6-0 BYU team now, who's going to be ranked in the top 12, who had, I think they were stripe out, insane environment, night game, who Kansas State turned over the ball 5 times, and they don't turn over the ball that much. And I know it was 38-9, but they outgained BYU. They outplayed by BYU pretty much in every facet of the game except for turnovers. And so the point is Kansas State had we'll call it a fluke loss. Maybe they still lose that game no matter what, but we'll call it a fluke loss. And Kansas State could still win out in the Big 12. Do I expect it? No, just because of how the Big 12 is. But we have 3 teams in the Big 12, and we had like 9 coming in that could have won it. Maybe a little less. We'll call it 8. And now we have Kansas State, Iowa State, and BYU as 3 teams that can really win the Big 12. That's all I'm going to talk about today. Thank you all for watching. Join the Discord.